Hello, all you delicious, delectable delights out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. My name is Devanin, and I'm your host, and I have with me the very, very soulful and intuitive Darrell. He's an author and a writer and a scholar on many fronts. How are you today, my friend?
Doing well. I'm excited to be here and ready to really get into it. The depth of things.
Mm-hmm. So we shall go meaningfully deep today. Now, you got 2 books, and we're gonna talk about Blood at the Root. Your first one was called A Lifetime of Men. Can you give us just, like, a little synopsis of what that one was about, A Lifetime of Men?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. It's about three generations of women fighting against a society that wants to take their autonomy away from them, that wants to tell them how they can live, how they can dress, how they can talk. The first one is contemporaneous with Great Depression, and then it goes on to the present. Um, and just the inspirational quick for this was the fact that I was raised by women. Yeah, my aunts, my grandmother, my mother, they're all very strong, all very intelligent. And so I knew no different. And then I went away to college and I heard the word feminist. And I didn't really know it. I'd heard it, but I didn't know what it meant. So I asked. And someone said, well, it's someone who believes all these derogatory things about women. Then I was scandalized. Like, you better not say that around my grandmother. She'll cut up. You know, it's, I was, I was lucky. I was blessed to have these women in my life. And so I guess, part of the subject matter of the book is a tribute to them.
You know what? There's nothing wrong with that. I was raised by, like, 3 women too, because God knows the men in my life I did not wanna be like. Like, pretty much every male in my family either hits women or cheats on them or a combination of the 2. And so I think the Lord really did me a mercy by letting me be the gay one, who was more drawn to the females. You know,
Mm.
I would rather this life than to be like they are on any fucking day of the week. So that gave you that view, from the female perspective. Now, the book Blood at the Root talks a lot about like racial issues and things like that. So people watching and listening, as you stated in like different research I've done, might go, "What does white boy know about that?" You know. But I'm gonna tell y'all from my days in the Air Force to my days on the streets selling dope in Houston, Texas, there are a lot of white boys out there who are very, very soulful and really, really feel the struggles of like ethnic people. I'm not talking about like white guilt. I'm talking about like they just identify with more of a diversity of races than you might think. The type of guys I used to hang out with didn't hang out with really white people. They would rather hang out with really ethnic folk and things like that. And I appreciate the sympathizers and the empathizers and the diversity God has given us from all the way back in the slave days. Not every white person was pro-slavery. We had the defectors that would come and help the black people and stuff like that. And so I believe it's a way of God balancing things out. If someone's more proponent of the universe, you can say it's the universe bringing balance or whatever the fuck. And so give us like a brief rundown of blood at the root and what it means to you.
Okay. Well, I have studied critical race theory, and my dissertation was on racialized and gendered violence in South Africa. So at least the bones of the theory are familiar. When it comes to blood at the root, I think it's important to say that it began not in a desire to see what race is, because that's not my place. It began by looking at the society in which I live and seeing all these false narratives. And excuse me, there are narratives that crushed people, that denigrated them, that limited them. And James Baldwin was writing about this, in the 50s and 60s. And he's basically said, how dare you try and reduce me to my suffering? How dare you try to reduce me to, you know, to my, the racism I've experienced? And so what I did is I looked at these narratives and I tried to pick out false narratives. And then I don't think with a story you can disprove it because it's a story. It doesn't follow logical. All right. But what you can do is you can tell other stories, stories that like take, take the pin and prick the balloons of those stories, stories that problematize them so that you're not getting that collapsing of all Black people into one identity, or you're not getting that collapsing of all women into subordinates, to victims, to playthings of men. And so what I tried to do, part of the reason I have 33 different characters in here is because I didn't want anybody to be able to point to one narrative and say, this is what he believes. Because this isn't about belief beyond the fact that I think that what is sick. I think that the narratives that we as a society have internalized and project, onto ourselves are sick. So yeah, again, the idea is to just make it impossible to take these dominant narratives, these violent narratives, and take them as gospel.
Mm. Well, that's the gospel right there if I ever heard it, y'all. Hallelujah, tabernacle, and praise. And so, like like the man said, y'all, the book is broken down into 33. They're like you might call them like little short stories and things like that, and there's like humor drizzled, I would say, throughout these these short excerpts or little snippets called Giggle House, which I think are meant to like maybe lighten the mood as you're going through it, but they can get a little dark too. This is a very dark read. It's
Mhm.
dark, and I'm here for the darkness, especially as we get this close to Halloween. So delicious. But the darkness though is true. It's not like it's like fictional, but it's a lot of truth to it too. And so you mentioned how Mr. Bolden was talking about not being reduced to his struggles. So I'm gonna cut right over to my favorite story, the one that stood out to me, which within the book is called Voices.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna read a little excerpt, if I may. Actually, I have several excerpts that I
Mhm.
might read. I'm channeling my inner Bugs Bunny right now. So
Yeah.
this first excerpt from Voices, it says, he drank when he could, malt liquor, or skunked beer, or ethyl alcohol until he blacked out. He smoked, or ate, or snorted, or shot whatever drugs he came across with communal pens, or razor blades, or jagged edged light bulbs turned crack pipes, bent on annihilation if possible, oblivion at a minimum. This story here was talking about a homeless person who like abandoned his family. I want to know how how were you able to tap into this sort of reality, because the writing speaks like somebody who was homeless before. Have you been homeless before?
No, no, but I worked as a chaplain in a VA hospital, and over 50% of the country's homeless population are veterans. So I would get a lot of people that would come in, and it was the most heartbreaking thing because there's a limit. I think it was 60 days. It might have only been 30. So you get these people who are hooked on drugs, out of their mind, their body's crashing. They come to the VA hospital. They get in the alcohol program. They get to have 3 meals a day and one place to sleep for, the 30 to 60 days. And then they go right back out and the cycle starts again. And I say this I'm not trying to judge them. I'm just trying to say watching them is like they took so much pain upon themselves. And some soldiers were more transparent, others were less transparent about the reasons why they were living the way they did. But what it all came down to is that they didn't have in anyone in their life um, to love them. And I know love sounds like such a hokey word, but I think when you're not talking necessarily about the parts that flowers love, but you're talking about the, okay, I'm going to look you in the eye. I'm going to listen and let you tell me who you are and what you need. And then I'm going to respond to you. And, either they don't have family or they've sort of broken the family's heart so many times, the family has cut them off.
Mhm.
when it comes to the doctors and nurses, it's not like they don't care, but they're trying to carry a massive caseload and they just don't have the time to sit down and hold people's hands as much as they'd like to. So, I listen to a lot of stories from such people, men and women, some stories that I'll never tell. Not because, I guess because I want to think that in some way, even though I'm not Christian, I want to believe that those moments were sacred. I want to believe that when we sat down and I allowed them to say what they wanted to say and listen to them, I think it actually made a difference. So anyway, that's how I had insight into that. I also, and this is me being old and doing what I know is right, as uncomfortable it is. I'm I'm very significantly bipolar. And so when you see the voices in the bifurcation, the trifurcation, what that is, it's pulling together the gross statistics about former servicemen and veterans being homeless. And then the percentage of the homeless that are mentally ill is massive too, because Ronald Reagan said in the 80s, you know what? We're going to eliminate all federal care for the mentally ill overnight. He doubled the homeless population. So there's a lot drawn together, a lot of anger, a lot of betrayal. And, I think there's so many different ways to read a scene. I think I wrote it one way because I am bipolar. But for me, the guy left his family because he didn't want to expose them to what was coming. And, that's significant. I hope, because I think there are a lot of people who deal with that. And I think there are a lot of people who don't know from day to day whether their presence in somebody else's life is positive or negative. And I mean, I could tell you, sometimes I struggle with that question, but the idea for me of walking away from people that I love as my wife and son is just devastating. So when I was writing that, I was trying to put myself in the headspace of somebody who felt so hopeless, who had so little access to the care they need, the therapists they need, the drugs they need, that they thought the best thing they could do for their family is to walk away. So yeah, I've lived a pretty sheltered life in some ways, but through various decisions I've made and jobs I've taken, whatever, have run into a wide variety of people with very different experiences. And it's something that I'm grateful for, but it's also something that's tremendously humbling because I can't understand finally what they went through. I can only listen. And really, in Blood at the Root, that's what I was trying to do is just listen to the things our society says and talk, interact with them. Let me give you one more example, and then I'll shut up and let you have the floor again. Sorry. So the way this book works is by inversion, distortion, manipulation, but there's also celebration. And so it's not meant to be unrelentingly, you know, dark and horrible, but there's a lot of dark and horrible in there. But anyway, one of the perversions that's in there is the Latin name of the billionaire's company stands for translated as someone who has been elected to accumulate limitless wealth or limitless profit. And I think that sort of pretty, just encapsulates a lot of what makes their country so sick is that we teach people to pursue things that aren't going to make them happy, that aren't going to fulfill them. We have people who say family is the most important thing, working 60 hours a week. And we have this idea of limitless profit, limitless income, but literally can't work out. And I won't go into the technical details of derivatives and whatnot, but let's just say that in the 80s, there were about, I want to say $8 billion worth of derivatives out there. There's over 700 now. So a derivative is essentially a made up financial product. And it just goes to show that our house is a house of cards. We're telling our people, we're gearing our people to this unlimited consumerism. So we're as a society telling them to do things, base their lives around something that can't happen. Something that is an illusion. Um, And so that's one of the things, and making that the name of the corporation. I wanted to kind of point to the fact is like, this is perverse. You know, we are, all of us for the most part, directing our energies towards things that A, we don't need, and B, they're not going to solve the problems that society has. Anyway, you have to go.
No, you know what? I like my show to be cathartic, for my guests, and I can tell this is some shit you need to say. So I'm just gonna let you go ahead and get it off your chest. And so, a couple of things here. So, you know, you know, plenty of people in the military. We go in there and we just don't come out the same. Whether you went over to a war or not. And so I appreciate that aspect of it. Now, you mentioned, like, if you were being nice and talking to these people, and you said, "Even though I'm not a Christian," why do you equate, like, some sort of
So
valor or some sort of characteristic of niceness to Christianity, and yet you disassociate yourself with that? Why did you specify that you're not a Christian, but you feel like you were still doing a good thing?
I guess the reason I specify that is because I grew up evangelical.
Oh, Lord.
And I went to seminary and I got ordained. I did that whole thing.
Ooh.
And so, like it or not, those are the words and images that are in my head. Like when I search for, you know, when I search for something that has the power of what I'm trying to say, it often falls back on that kind of language. Now, I left basically because I didn't feel like I could, in good conscience, continue in the church. As far as any anger or residual hurt, I I really try to let go of anger. And who doesn't, right? But I'm very much, I wouldn't say I'm a Buddhist. That's the practice that I follow, the precepts, the meditation, what have you. And one of the things that Buddha teaches is that, you know, the future's in your imagination, the past is your memory. The only thing that's real is right here, right now. Now, I'm not saying take that hippy dippy, live in the moment type thing. But what I am saying is that I don't want to reach for something that is going to be like poison to me. I don't want to reach for something that is going to make me angrier than I already am. So I guess the reason I was trying to say I'm not a Christian, but I had that experience was just to take advantage of that imagery, but also to say that when I'm talking about this interaction, when I'm talking about its power, it's not what you hear about in church. I don't mean angels or Jesus or God or anything. What I mean, and I guess the closest thing the definition of what I would give of God at this point in my life is to say that God is what happens when two people are present for each other. Um, so in listening to the person, it wasn't just being nice. It was like, especially street people, how many people stop and have a conversation with them? You hear all all the debate about, well, what should a homeless person be able to spend their, food stamps on or whatever. They are not treated like human beings. And I know most homeless don't have food stamps, but you know what I mean. And so for me to just say, you know what, I'm going to give myself to you for this time, I think it is a tremendous gift. And, it's not just homeless people. I think everybody wants to be heard. Um, I think anytime somebody pays attention to another person, that person is going to feel valued to a greater or lesser extent. That person is going to feel like they've been invested in. You know, you could be doing any number of other things, but you're here talking to me, or more appropriately, listening to me.
So, you know, I was something that stands out to me about you is that you took the time to write this, and this book is really all about, disadvantaged people, marginalized people, people who haven't been heard, people who are reduced to their negative circumstances and things like that. And, you could have walked by, or nothing like, you didn't have to even, stop and do this. So I'd like you to give yourself a hell of a lot more credit, you know, than what you do, because writing a book is a gargantuan undertaking. People might say, "Oh, I'm gonna write that book, girl," or whatever. Most people won't. Like, actually sitting down to do it, you've done it twice now, and both times you did it for the sake of giving voice to people other than yourself. And so I don't refer to myself as a Christian either, because the word has become corrupt and I don't need a word to define my faith anyway. Jesus himself technically wasn't a Christian. That's something that people came up with after the fact. And so I'm actually about to release a free book that's just going to be on my website called Don't Call Me a Christian. And it's going to get into like my views on the fuckery that has become of the church. And you're right. The sort of love you're showing is not found in churches, not typically. And so, I appreciate the vegan food that they have down at the Buddhist temples. I've been to the ones here. It's always great to go hang out with other bald bitches, such as my I I don't feel alone when I'm there. And so, y'all, Kenan mentioned Mr. Fairchild, like the billionaire from the book. So when the book opens, Fairchild's kid has decided that he's going to make a video like sacrificing himself in a way. He's like getting his ass kicked and beaten. He's like walking on broken glass and he hadn't eaten in 22 days and all of this, is going on. And he's videoing this and broadcasting this as if to atone for all the like racist sins of his forefathers and stuff like that. And so you see this echoed throughout the stories throughout the book. There is the appearance of like Hispanic people and, Middle Eastern people. I think you really covered like the gamut on a lot of different ethnicities here, sir. I mean, I am impressed.
Thank you. I'll tell you, the first thing that you mentioned, I've been I've been accused of being a racist against whites because I wrote it.
It
You know, to me, with a book that it doesn't have a traditional structure, there's very obviously something going on here that isn't normal. So if you want to just blow through it, that's fine. There's many ways to read, but don't blow through it and then go and write a review and say these insane things. That first scene with Christopher Fairchild being led, that's an inversion of the historical reality. One of the biggest slave markets in the country used to be in New York City on the corner of Wall and Pearl. So what do we assume with Wall Street? It's like a symbol of American wealth, right? So you have this scene that people are objecting to and calling me anti-white. And it's like the history isn't hard to find. You can read it for yourself. My point is not to be anti-white or pro-black or anything like that. My point is to say we are telling ourselves this story or not telling ourselves these stories, as the case may be. And guess what? They're real. We need to face them. We are destroying ourselves by making these lies the center of our social life as a country. That opening scene is super disturbing. And just so all your listeners know, I'm not a psycho. I did not get off writing that. There's tons of violence in there, but guess what? Sit down and talk with some people who've lived in certain places or escaped certain places or whatnot. It's a violent fucking life. Sorry. I didn't mean to say that, but and people like it is insane to me. They so hate being uncomfortable, even if for 10 seconds, that they're going to completely reject this scene and not sit with it. And, I know I sound like a pissed off writer, and I guess I'm letting myself express that a little more than I should today.
let it out, let it out.
But I mean, the reality is we need not just to talk to each other, but we need to listen to each other. We need to listen to what's happened. It's probably cliche at this point, but James Baldwin, he said, not everything we face can be changed, but nothing can be changed until we face it. And I think that the heart of all this, the heart of this project is this sort of almost a petition on my part. It's like, what if we gave honesty a chance? What if we sat down and acknowledged what had happened? What would that do to our society? Now, I've been really frustrated by people going on and on about Black Lives Matter recently because they completely misrepresent it in so many ways. But they're also acting like the American public has an attention span that's going to last more than 18 months. But in this stuff, it just goes further and further from memory. And so these people are convincing themselves that this is a great threat to their way of life and their rights. Or they're not even trying to walk through reality. And I don't know. I keep tripping over my own words. But I guess what I want people to see is that, you know, there's a liberation in truth. It'll be uncomfortable for a while, maybe for a very long time, but wholeness is the point, right? We want to be healthy. We want to be there for each other. We don't want to be at war with each other. We want to understand each other to a certain extent when we talk. And that's only going to happen if you're willing to do the work required to uncover the actual history of this country. I mean, I don't know how many people are aware that we bombed Black Wall Street into non-existent. We say that, well, Black people have never had wealth. No, we just bomb the shit out of them every time they get it. I lived in Chicago for a while, and one of the things that they had there is, they have these sort of neighborhood stores. The idea being that if you're Black, you give your money to another Black person, not to some white billionaire who owns a corporation. Well, guess what? Those stores were put out of business. It wasn't because of anything that the proprietors were doing. It was because the powers that be recognized the threat that equality posed to their bullshit narratives and to the power predicated. It, I don't know, maybe but it does bother me sometimes that I've enjoyed such privilege. And so maybe there is a modicum of guilt or anything here, but I really think that where I'm coming from is just this belief that amidst all this darkness, there can be celebration, there can be triumph. It won't ever be final. This will always be imperfect, sinful to use a Christian phrase. But we don't even know because we're not even willing to try to with the levels of joy and wholeness and health that are available to us that we could have in our lives.
So, yo, what Ken is talking about when he says like the Black Wall Street, you might want to look it up. This is the Tulsa race massacres back in 1921. And I'm just gonna put that out there, and y'all can go and research it. Man, I feel like you talk like a like a minister, like a preacher, not the fake ones, not the rapey ones, like
Like,
like the act right, hallelujah. Like the actual real ones that and I remember listening to whenever I did go to church, they had a certain anointing and like the spirit of God like was truly, truly, truly with them. And they were marked, and like different. And therefore I can see that you're called, like by God. I can see that you're called, and I believe that that is what has given you your perspective. Because when the Lord puts that stamp on our forehead like that, it changes us. It changes the way we look at the world. It changes the way the world perceives us. You're somebody who has been set apart by Christ, and so what I appreciate about the openness of Jesus Christ is that you don't have to go to church to find him. Like, you don't have to these things, all these religions and stuff that people have created, the 50 million versions of the Bible, well, 50 million versions of Christianity and all of that, unnecessary. All you need to do is be sincere in your relationship with him, and you carry that sincerity heavily. And
thank you.
and I respect that you're a practicing Buddhist now, but I still I feel that spirit on you, bruh. And so, because your first book and this one here, they both sound it's like written ministry because, yo, preaching and carrying the gospel is not just standing in a fucking pulpit wearing a suit. That is so last season. Eh, now you reach people. It's just reaching people in whatever way you can, be that YouTube, books, podcasts, sitting down at a coffee table talking to somebody, preaching the gospel, carrying the message of Jesus Christ is not relegated to televangelists and four goddamn walls. God is not limited to that. Now, you had dropped an F bomb, you said, "Fuck," and seem to be quite comfortable with that, but I just wanna remind you, this is the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast where we discuss whatever the fuck we want to, and so and I know where you're coming from, you still have those, like, rel maybe, like, religious restraints and stuff in you, but I'm just gonna let you know again that you are free on this show.
Thank you.
So, now so I have in my head who I think your book is for. And when you were writing this, when you finished it, and this is going beyond that boring old question, who is your ideal reader?
Mhm.
'Cause this dark stuff right here doesn't really, this is different. And I also wanted to tell you about the negative reviews because I get those too. We have to remember that people like Amazon and different book retailers don't make the people who read and review things go through mental health tests or anything. So literally anybody can go on there and say anything. And remember the devil will try to attack you whenever you're going to do good. And this is a very good thing that you're trying to do. People have called me entitled after reading my memoir. They took away from it that I was entitled. So, and I just had to like, okay, you're just gonna like let that one go. And so, what kind of change would you like to see this book make in the world? Who did you personally write this for? Why? Who do you want to read this? Is it white people? Is it what? Like, who is it?
I don't know. I think I just want people to read it who will think about it. I don't think it's sort of a call to arms in the way that some other things are, like marching orders. But I do hope that people will look at this and look at some of the stories and be like, start like getting in their head and asking themselves, why does it seem different? Why does it seem weird? I would like them to see, and most people haven't commented it. I don't know if they see it or not, but I would like them to see the spots where joy crops up, the spots where healing crops up. One of my favorite chapters in there is, Mary, the Mary section. And it's these two church going people. The father kicks the, the son out of the house because he's gay, even though he doesn't want to, even though he's like crying as he's doing it, and like tries to distract his wife so he can flip a ton of money into his son's pocket. And, you know, that's so much pain and whatnot. And then they go ahead and after a limited reconciliation, that lose them to AIDS. And so all this unrelenting pain and like the worst kind of pain, the deepest kind of pain. And at the end of that chapter, this woman and her husband, before he passed away, were able to reconcile. They were able to be together, to name their mistakes and find love in a love that carried them. And the chapter ends with Mary writing a letter to Fairchild, to his father, saying, whatever he did, however bad it was, love is the answer. Like, trust me, we messed this up and don't do it. All you need is love. And so on the one hand, like I intentionally chose that hokey, all you need is love. But I did that because here's a woman who's been through hell and back, who's lost every person that mattered to her. And she's okay. She found a way to interact with her husband and her son, even though they're both gone. She's found a way to look at the garden that he made for her and to derive joy from that. And so here's this woman who suffered so much and she's discovering these blessings. And then she reaches out to another person. And that's the big thing there. That's what that's the theory that I want to test, that love cannot but extend itself. So I've heard somewhere along the way, I think it was Richard of St. Victor, he was a theologian, and he said that the reason there is the Holy Spirit is because when there's love, it can't help but go outward and create something new. So, you know, is that chapter key to understanding the whole book? No, but it's definitely raising a possibility that maybe we have something right available to us that we don't take advantage of, that we don't know. And one of the things, and this was important to me, is that these people, I wanted them to have hurt people. I wanted them to be sinful, especially the father, so that that love, it wasn't just coming to Miss Perfect. It wasn't just coming to somebody who'd earned it. It was love and coming, and it changed things. So I think what I would like people to do is maybe just read the chapters and ask themselves if there's anything in there that resonates with them deeply, or anything in there that that jars with some of the stories that they've been told. So yeah.
Well, something that jars, thank you for that breakdown, my friend. And I'm going to read me another excerpt because this here jarred with me. And this here is a good example of kind of like how the comedy can be mixed with the seriousness here. And so I'm going to read now. So it says, y'all hear about the new drug they coming out with? Yeah, it's a dick pill. They calling it black, guaranteed to double your dong in a New York minute. There's a lot of New York references, y'all, because this story is based in New York City. So now, before you white people, and he's spelling it WYPIPO, which I think is hilarious. I don't know if there's a reason, but I really, really love it. So now, before you white people hiding in the corner get too excited, you should know that it has some pretty serious side effects. Cab drivers, employers, and loan providers won't be able to see you no more. Cops in your vicinity are going to hallucinate automatic weapons, and hot damn if you won't be drawing the Tyler Perry movies, drinking water at room temperature and baby bougie teas like a moth to a motherfucking flame. And then I'm going to add to that, piggybacking off of the hallucinating automatic weapons and take it a bit more serious. There's another excerpt that says, we interrupt this broadcast for a breaking news special report. We have unconfirmed reports coming in that a standoff between a man and the St. George police has ended without casualties. While we have yet to ascertain the alleged gunman's identity, eyewitnesses describe him as a thin, clean-shaven Caucasian male, approximately 6 feet tall with a military haircut. We can also now confirm that police have recovered an HK-417 A2 20-inch sniper rifle from the crime scene, leading to speculation that they may have apprehended the courthouse gunman. While ballistics have yet to be run, authorities believe the rounds that killed Stacey Harris and Terrace Green will match the rifle. Talk to me about both of those excerpts and just how relevant this is right now.
Well, see, the first one I was a little conflicted about early because it's a play on a racist joke, obviously. Dick pill, black, side effects, can't spell or swim. So I didn't mean, I hope that doesn't offend you, but that's the joke. And so I was trying to flip that
Mhm.
so that, you know, we're no longer going to be shitting all over black people with a punchline of this joke. We're going to be pointing a lens at society. You know, it is also very hard for a white person to know what, to what extent it's helpful to talk about these shootings. The there's been so many.
Yeah.
And, people at Ferguson were railing like it never happened before. It's like, you guys, do you have any memory? We had race riots in the late 80s. America gets really interested in race every 30 or 40 years. And it's usually just to remind African American people that, if they step out of line and boom. I decided to use it just because it had become so ubiquitous. I'm not saying that any of the lives that were taken deserved it or anything, but there was one in particular that just devastated me. Tamir Rice, 12-year-old kid. I mean, oh my God, like, it, I can't explain that. I mean, I've heard all kinds of, psychiatric explanations about people seeing what they're taught to see. And so therefore the training the police get, which is like for Armageddon, they see the threat no matter whether or not one exists. So maybe that's the case, but my son's 9 and a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old going to be a little bit older, but he's 4'6" or 4'10". You can't mistake a prepubescent child for an adult. You just can't. And that to me says again that there's some narratives buried deep in our psyche as a society that allows this, that authorizes this. You know, Obama, when he said that his son would look like Trayvon, like that, I mean, it was so right, so perfect. He got slammed for it, as we knew he would, but it needs to get that kind of real for more people, but before things are going to happen.
I could see this book here being used for like open mic nights, you know, in different poetry rooms. I could see this being used on like group Zoom discussions and stuff like that. It's very provocative. And the way that it's broken down is good talking points to bring up a lot of things, I could see this in colleges and universities, and things like that. And it just it's the thing's like almost 300 pages too, so it's not like it's like it's it's like a good whole lot of content. This is very, very high value to me. I cannot wait to leave you quite a delicious review. So
Thank you.
I'm gonna read my final excerpt because it gives me an excuse to speak a little bit of Espanol
Okay, nice.
and also highlights these, the race wars that I have witnessed personally between like black and Hispanic people, which I thought was a
Mhm.
silly damn thing when I was in Southern California and a recruiter for the Air Force. In some of my high schools, the blacks and the Hispanics were fighting while the white people were standing there looking at them. And I was like, y'all have got this completely fucked up. And so to begin, he says, who else we got here tonight? I see a bunch of brothers and sisters, hermanos y hermanas. I know my people have had beef with your people, pero the enemy of my enemy, right? Solidaridad. Tenemos que mantenernos unidos. Laquanda is an 87-year-old sword-swallowing lesbian from Detroit. Jose is a 17-year-old digital overlord from Oaxaca. She loves Sudoku. His mama once drilled him with a shoe at 30 yards. What brought them together? White people.
Uh, I I had a review that what they got left in like his big nasty, tell you what, the like worst thing he says, you know what? And that comedy is not funny. Whatever it is, like it's funny to me. I'm glad it resonated with you.
Yeah, if only we could just let the good people come in there and review us. I went on someone else's show and we were talking about like Jesus and dick and fucking and whatever. And somebody messaged her and they were like fearing, for her soul, it was gonna go. It was like quite dramatic, but there's all kinds of minds in this world. But what do you have to say to this whole war between like black people and Hispanic people, which is I felt like was at the heart of this?
Yeah, no, I kicked off while I was in Chicago, or at least escalated. And I think what you have is something that you could find in just about every totalitarian society. And what I mean by that is, say I am sitting pretty, I'm a white person, life is good for me. I got these black people, I got to keep them under control. They outnumber me by tons. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to create a third group or help a third group achieve some kind of success, some kind of wealth, some kind of, toehold. And then they're going to turn on each other. And it's not an accident. It's manufactured. It's facilitated. I mean, it's most obvious, I guess, in South Africa, where they basically took a small group of the black folk there and some Indians and allowed them to achieve middle class. And suddenly those black folk and Indians are voting for the apartheid government and helping them keep the black South Africans down. And I really think that what happens here is sort of just a variety of that. Yeah.
The only thing I have to say to that is, "Oh, hell no." That's all I can say. That's all I can say. So I read where you donate 10% of the profits from your books to charity. And so I was wondering which charities and why. And then is this 10% like a tithing thing, or where did you come up with that number from?
So I came up with the number just because it was a nice round number. Independent author like me is like, I don't make any money. I haven't sold that many books, honestly. But that said, what little money I do get, if I could take that and put it on something that's supporting, a project that I'm trying to help or support in my book, then that's a really good feeling, a way of, I think, putting my money where my mouth is, if you will. Girls Inc. is the one that the charity that a lifetime of men donates to. And basically what that is a program that through mentorship, science, technology, engineering, what are med- sorry, medicine, create women who will be more likely to succeed in the future. It's a program targeted at young girls, teenage girls. So mathematics, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The other one, Blood at the Root, is Sport to Rock Your World, which is a organization that I just absolutely love because what they're doing is they're trying to teach the next generation of artists how to use their art as activism, how to use their art to affect the world. And so I actually had an interview with them. I spoke to their class and accidentally dropped an F bomb, and I haven't heard that from them yet. But I still love what they're doing, and great people, great people there.
I think you're a great person, Kian. Oh, he
Thank
has, oh, you're welcome. He has you said your name's from Ireland?
Gaelic, yeah, Gaelic is the language, but yeah, it's from
Gaelic.
Ireland.
Gaelic. I think it's a sexy ass name.
And so
And so, how long were you in the military?
I was ROTC from 2001 to 2004, and then I was in the Army National Guard from 2006 to 2011. I never got sent anywhere. I mostly worked as an acting chaplain because the battalion that I was part of didn't have a chaplain assigned to it. It was, for the most part, pretty wonderful for me because I got to help a lot of people. I didn't have a whole lot of oversight, so I didn't feel the hierarchy too intensely. There's some pretty hard parts though too. Right? Human beings aren't meant to kill each other; they just are. And once they have, that they come back, like you said, differently. You see some guys who a 1,000 yard stare. After that, just seem sort of vacant. Or one guy, I knew, stabbed his wife. Obviously, that wasn't who he'd been at all up to that point. Doesn't forgive what he did, but I think when you go and you have certain experiences, it changes you. But I did have, this is kind of funny. I did have a guy sign up for a wedding retreat or a couples retreat that I was organizing, and he put down one wife's name and another wife's number. It turned out he was married to two women at the same time, and dealing with that was fun. I finally said, "This is above my pay fee." That just instead of a ladder.
And I'm assuming this was not a polyamorous situation.
No, no.
That's
But
unfortunate. They could have had all the fun, 3 ways every night. Come on. Oh, yeah. So well, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. I appreciate
thank
that
you. You too.
immensely. Oh, absolutely. I can't say I'd do it again, but, I did what I did, and so it's done now. So, okay. So then my so then just as we get ready to close, and I thank you so much for your time. For somebody else who might want to use writing in this way, or any kind of closing words you have at all, whether it's that or whatever, just for the world in general. Because this is a very specific type of polarizing writing that I've never seen before. And so if somebody's inspired to do this, what would you say to them?
All right. Two things. The first is sort of general, I guess. Whenever you have violence, then use the word provocative. You have a book that is violent or provocative, you always have to weigh. It's just really difficult calculus because you risk, on the one hand, seeming like you're just going in for pornography of violence, trying to be shocking, and then you lose your ability to communicate. On the other hand, if you get it right, who knows exactly what that means, but then that violence will lead them to further questions. And one of the things that I have found is that could be very difficult to get people to read books that ask questions, that demand answers, that require that you not just take your first impression and have that be it. And the final thing I want to say, and this is, I think, more important. If you want to, and you want to write specifically to have some kind of impact on the world, the first thing you need to do is read tremendously, read widely. There's so much out there, so many different circumstances and perspectives. And what that'll do is it will not just give you information, but it will give you a sense of the conversations that are already going on. So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. And what the writing or the reading will give you time to do too is get yourself to the point. And this is the most important thing I can say to any aspiring writer. Get yourself to the point where you can be your own source of affirmation. If you are writing to get compliments from other people, if you are writing to get a book deal, if you are writing to make money, the odds are you're going to fail. And that failure compounds, and then you internalize it. I have to fight that against that myself, sometimes more successfully than others. And I've seen it in so many others. Do not write for, for other people, according to other people's standards. Read tremendously, write for yourself, figure out who you are and what you're doing. And once you're armed with that background knowledge, the knowledge of your identity and what specifically it is that you want to do, then you can step out into the world. Then you can step out into trying to get published and whatnot. And you could step out with the confidence that comes from knowing who you are, from knowing you know your stuff, and from knowing exactly what it is you want to accomplish. I think a lot of writers rush things because everybody wants to be published. I want to be published. And what ends up happening is a tremendous amount of rejection. And some of it can learn from, some of it is really useful. I've had some rejection and even a negative review of Blood that I felt was tremendously helpful. But you'll be ready to deal with that, to process that. You'll be ready to take it and learn from it if you do the work ahead.
You preach it now. Thank you so much, Ciahnan, for coming on the show today. Y'all, his website is ciahnandarrell.com. I'm going to put this in the showy notes, as I always do. He's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Again, his first book is called A Lifetime of Men, and the second one is called Blood at the Root. Both of those are at his website, ciahnandarrell.com. Thank you so much, my friend. It was a pleasure speaking with you today.
And you as well. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. It was just a fun conversation.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Feel free to reach out to me directly at Ciahnan at sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Ciahnan. It's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.